So the House passes the Veterans Administration choice funding fix in the final pre-recess work. What happened, the financial bridge for choice. So what choice is, it allows veterans to seek private sector physicians at the VA's expense, which I think is a fine thing. I think vets should have the choice, and this was passed, and it's expected to quickly pass the Senate, and giving mid-August funding deadline for the program. Senate Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Johnny Isakson, a Republican from Georgia, and Ranking Member John Tester, a Democrat from Montana, have already endorsed the plan. The final plan, which passed the House by a 414-0 vote Friday, is a $3.9 billion emergency spending plan that provides $2.1 billion for 6 months of funding for the choice program and $1.8 billion for 28 new medical leases and new healthcare specialist hires within the VA. Now, they say money from some of the legislation would come from trimming pensions for Medicaid eligible veterans and a variety of fees, offsets that have been largely non-controversial. What has been controversial is the larger issue of continuing to fund the choice program. Several leading veterans groups have resisted efforts to continue funding the program without more money for core VA services, arguing that shifting money outside the federal system risks undermining it. What this is interesting on a lot of levels is, yes, I agree that the VA need to put more money in the core VA services. I do, however, think it's good for some of the vets I've talked to feel more comfortable going into private sector physicians. And one of the other things, though, that I am really disappointed by is they tried to put they wanted to have a floor debate about allowing veterans to talk about using cannabis to treat a variety of ailments with their Veterans Affairs doctors, and House Republican leaders on Wednesday ended that. They voted against that. And this aspect, this really bothers me. I've talked about pot and marijuana, legalizing it before, and many of you have said that you are vets and dealing with PTSD, and I have a real problem with the VA or any physician or organization that views marijuana as a bad drug, but then just gives people suffering from, and not just PTSD, but vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Many also had TBI, a traumatic brain injury, on top of the PTSD. And the first response is just throwing a bunch of different medication and not knowing which works and which doesn't. And demonizing weed, I think, is irresponsible. So this relates into some of the other videos I've done about, I did the video about how California in the open governor's race in 2018, and Gavin Newsom, the former mayor of San Francisco, was getting money from the pot industry. And I think this is something that the pot industry needs to use some of its influence and money to get the VA to realize this, because I have seen, and then when I was in the movie Super High Me with Doug Benson and talked to some of the doctors and research of that film. I know it's a funny documentary, and hey, Doug Benson gets high for 30 days in a row, but I met a lot of medical marijuana patients, and I talked to numerous vets that said, you know, marijuana helped get me off these heavy prescription drugs. I know people that have used marijuana to get off a serious opiate addiction, and the opiate crisis in America and certain parts of this country is really awful. And so, and it's very severe for vets, especially if they're suffering from chronic pain, like physical pain, like have shrapnel. I knew a Marine who finally was like glad to get his leg amputated because all the surgeries were just causing him so much pain. And to not provide this for vets is, I think it's really irresponsible. And I think it's also a little heartless. And we got to stop. It's not the 1950s, like reefer madness. Like marijuana it's fine. It's fine. If you're going to drink alcohol and take all these prescription drugs, marijuana is fine. So I really wish, and one thing you guys can do is petition your local lawmakers and petition your local VA to allow vets to recommend medical marijuana. And there's enough research out there for them to see this. And I think the stigma that you just smoke pot and you become a dumb burnout or whatever, like, I think there's too many, and any of you who've had personal experience with this, be you a vet or not, I would write your personal story to your local lawmakers and to your local VA and say, hey, this can really help people. So it's something to follow. I'm glad, as I said, that they are continuing to fund the choice program. The VA, obviously, I've talked about it before, needs more funding and needs to be overhauled. This is a step in the right direction, and if any of these representatives that I mentioned earlier, House Veterans Committee Chairman Phil Rowe, Republican from Tennessee, then I would let them know how you feel, because here's what the VA officials said, that without, this is going back to the choice option, without a funding fix by mid-August, thousands of veterans using the choice program could be left without medical options in their communities, and third-party administrators working with the program could be cut off from the VA system. Part of that too is if you're a vet and a VA is very, very far away from you, and you have to kind of go to, I mean, your options are like driving hundreds of miles to a VA or going to a local doctor. You should be able to go to a local doctor and the VA should pay for it. In my opinion, if you're a vet and you served, especially if you were deployed into a forward area, you should absolutely have whatever type medical care you need. And I think, so it's something to pay close attention to, and also to petition because it's now moving to the Senate. And also, if you want to get more information, you can go to, this story is at militarytimes.com. You can go to these groups: Veterans of Foreign Affairs, AMVETS, Disabled American Veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, Military Officers Association of America, Military Order of the Purple Heart, Vietnam Veterans of America, and Wounded Warrior Project. And what all these groups, so those are groups you can contact, and here's what they also said about the choice debate. That lawmakers must immediately turn our attention to the coming debate over how to strengthen and modernize the VA healthcare system and how community care should be integrated to ensure timely and convenient access for all enrolled veterans. Steps in the right direction, something we all need to stay on top of, and petition your lawmakers to make sure that they're doing all of these things that these vets organizations are asking for, and let them use marijuana, for real. Like and subscribe to the video, you guys. Share it out there. Thanks for watching.